Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
I'm sure my face says it. I am nervous. I'm very nervous, but we are doing everything we can to get these families home for Christmas.
At the end of the day, he was in a position to do something, and he should have done what was appropriate for everybody and not choose to stay silent for the betterment of winning a Stanley Cup.
I'm pretty sure there'll probably be some important historical figures that we would know of, but unfortunately years and years go by and they've been forgotten of.
Thanks for joining us. Some in Windsor-Essex say building supply shortages are getting worse. Stores say they're waiting weeks or months for things to arrive that previously may have taken days. All of this is putting pressure on contractors to meet deadlines. And as the CBC's Jason Vio tells us, that might mean several families won't be in their homes in time for the holidays.
Right now, Habitat for Humanity Windsor-Essex is building 4 homes on St. Luke Road in the Ford City neighborhood. Delayed supplies and labor shortages have set them back. And now, for the first time in the organization's history, they're worried the families destined for these homes won't be in by the holidays.
Our team is fantastic. The community is fantastic. And I know everybody's doing everything they can to try to get us to the finish line on time. Unfortunately, at this point, we can't make the promise.
There will be 16 kids between the 4 families set to move into these homes. They'll all have geared-to-income mortgages and one day own the house, and they're coming from overcrowded living situations or substandard conditions. Some have been bouncing around from rental to rental because of the rising cost of rent.
We've had families whose kids just stopped unpacking, and so to know that their kids finally have a place to unpack and do homework and all those things and sit around a table and eat dinner together as a family. That's what it's all about.
Not only have labor and supply shortages been a big challenge due to COVID-19, but rising costs have hit them hard. When they planned for these homes in 2019, the budget was $800,000. 2 years later, when shovels hit the ground, that ballooned to $1.2 million. And companies that sell supplies for new homes like these say they've never seen shortages like this. Sold out signs are plastered all over the showroom at Windsor's Tamar Building Products.
It's getting worse. Yeah, we thought by fall it would get a little bit better. It's getting worse. We're on allocation now with a lot of suppliers, especially aluminum. In the past, we would order our material and it would come in and everyone would be happy. Now they're just sending us whatever they want.
Most of the orders they get are just a fraction of what they requested. Previously, shingles would take 2 to 3 days to arrive. Now, many are out of stock, and the ones that are available take 2 to 3 weeks. And windows once took 2 weeks. Now they won't arrive for 12 to 14 weeks.
So this is our eaves trough coil right now, these 2 little rows right here. Normally, pre-COVID, this aisle would be to about here and almost to the ceiling.
And there's no end in sight for building supply shortages. Some of Tamar's suppliers have told them the new year isn't looking any better. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
Windsor-born hockey coach Joel Quenneville has resigned from the Florida Panthers NHL team where he was head coach. The resignation comes in the wake of sexual abuse allegations leveled by a former Blackhawk player. Kyle Beach says he was abused by a video coach that worked for the Blackhawks while Quenneville was coach there, and that Quenneville knew about it. Dale Molnar now with local reaction.
Joel Quenneville is now facing allegations that he knew about the abuse Kyle Beach was suffering while Quenneville was the coach of the Chicago Blackhawks. Yesterday, he stepped down as head coach of the Florida Panthers.
I think what he has done is completely disgraceful.
Lydia Fiorini is the executive director of the Windsor-Essex County Sexual Assault Crisis Center. She says resigning now is too little too late.
He had an opportunity to take accountability. He had an opportunity again to take accountability and chose to do neither.
Quenneville has denied knowing about the abuse Beach allegedly suffered from a video coach at the Blackhawks, but Beach alleges Quenneville knew.
I have seen the report that came out from the Chicago Blackhawks private investigation, and there's some pretty disturbing quotes from the one in particular from Stan Bowman, referring to Joel Quenneville and a conversation that they had in a meeting with several others, that he's quoted him as saying something along the lines of, "We can't deal with this now because we're so close to in the Stanley Cup Finals."
Fiorini says in order for anything to change, the culture in sport has to change.
We can do all the education that we want. However, if the organization is not set up to respond to someone who reports abuse, then it's for naught.
Quenneville is in the Windsor-Essex County Sports Hall of Fame. It's not clear if he will be removed. A statement from the chair reads in part, "The Windsor-Essex County Sports Hall of Fame shall seek to uphold its values while adhering to the highest ethical, professional, and athletic standards in all its actions and decisions." The Windsor Spitfires hoisted Quenneville's number to the rafters 20 years ago, and the Windsor-Essex Sports Persons of the Year organization named their Coach of the Year award after Quenneville. Tonight, the organization said it was not removing his name because it continues to see him as an outstanding citizen and will stand by him. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
High school students in Windsor-Essex will have to wait a few more weeks to get back in the game. Late November is when sports games will start back up again. But practices will be starting up again sooner than that, with both English, public, and the Catholic boards saying this is for fully vaccinated students only. Extracurricular activities have been on hold since the start of the school year. Here's how some students are reacting.
I know most people are excited about sports coming back because obviously they want sports to come back. It's like what they play and what they want to do, planning to go to post-secondary. So
I think it's important because it's something they're doing after school too. I mean, after high school.
A lot of grade 12 students, a lot of grade 11, even the newer kids in Kennedy, they really want to get back into sports. But then again, we have to be very, very careful if we're going to do that, because we don't want school to get shut down.
I'd probably do hockey if we got the chance, basketball and volleyball. Definitely basketball, yeah.
You know, I'm excited to have sports back, and it's just gonna make the school year a lot better.
The federal government has decided to carry on with its court fight against providing compensation to First Nations children who were removed from their homes. Ottawa has been involved in a 14-year battle over First Nations child welfare. In 2016, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal found the federal government had discriminated against First Nations children. It found that Ottawa knowingly underfunded child services for those living on reserve. And that led to thousands of children being removed from their homes and in many cases facing abuse in foster care. The tribunal ordered $40,000 be paid to each child affected along with their parents, which adds up to billions of dollars for Ottawa. That ruling was upheld by the federal court. Ottawa is appealing that ruling. And the province is investing more than $36 million in community-led mental health and addiction support in Indigenous communities across the province.
And ensuring Indigenous communities throughout the province have access to culturally appropriate mental health and addiction support when and where they need them.
The minister says more than $20 million will go directly towards services to support Indian residential school survivors. He adds the funding will help ensure culturally appropriate, accessible, and safe support for Indigenous communities. Ontario's oldest European cemetery is shrouded in mystery. Assumption Cemetery is hundreds of years old, a stone's throw away from the Ambassador Bridge. And as CBC's Jennifer Lagrassa reports, little is known, but people are trying to find out more.
Hundreds of cars and dozens of students walk by this spot almost every day. And even though it's visible to people here in Windsor, not much is known about Assumption Cemetery. 3 people I spoke with are trying to change that. In his hand, Tom Vadic holds hundreds of old documents from Assumption Church. These files tell him who is buried, but he can't understand them.
Records in the churches are written in French. The most important words I know are père, mère, well, those are father, mother right there. Sepulture, which is the burials.
In some cases, these are the only records left. Established in 1748, those laid to rest here haven't had the most peaceful stay. The cemetery has been moved twice, from the riverfront to Assumption Park, and finally in 1859 to this intersection at Huron Church Road and Wyandotte Street West. There's an unknown number of unmarked graves, yet the cemetery is still active.
We believe there's close to 100, if not 150 graves that are still available. They've already been pre-purchased, so that's the relatives of the deceased that are already here. The relatives have already pre-purchased these plots, and these are the ones that we're unfortunately waiting for them to pass away until we would inter them in the ground.
The identity of some site owners aren't known until someone comes to claim them. And when they do, it's possible they could be buried beside Cindy Moynihan Foreman's ancestor.
They did locate one ancestor who was buried there, and his name is Dennis Moynihan. And I don't know a lot about him. And the reason for that is he died in 1860. So paper records are incredibly complicated to find.
Do they have a headstone? Did you find that out?
A lot of these headstones are buried. They sort of sink and they go under. So to my knowledge, his headstone has not been located. So somehow he rose very quickly to the top. So he was a school teacher, then he was a land agent, then he was responsible for one of the infantry groups during one of the rebellions in Sandwich. And he died young though. So like I said, his early death in his 40s meant that there was no record. Nothing's written of him in any of the history books.
She says her research shows the first Windsorite who died from the Spanish flu in 1918 is also buried here. Strolling through the cemetery, you can see its direct connection to Windsor. Headstones match street names. Windsor Public Library says most of these people own farmland in the city, but names on other stones can't be identified. Even if their name is in here, we may not know where they are here. Those I spoke with say that it's important to learn about the past and the mystery that lies beneath. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
To mark Halloween, it's now time for a spooky story. This year, we wanted to learn about scary tales from abroad. One woman from Nigeria tells us about an old folk tale from when she was growing up. As the story goes, in the 2 weeks after Christmas, at midnight, a god called a Jew comes out, ready to find those who have committed heinous crimes and are not being truthful about them. But beware, those who see it could also be in peril.
I have never seen it, but the story goes that even if during that time, during the fortnight, you can hear like footsteps, heavy footsteps going around your house. And we were advised never to peep through the window or through the door, because even if we peep, that masquerade will notice that you peep, and the masquerade will come out as well and carry you. So what we do is once it's almost 9, it comes out midnight, just to tell you, it's not just night. Midnight at the darkest pinch of night that nobody will see nothing. So what we do is we lock our doors and we don't make a peep. No noise. Because they say if you make a noise, if we notice, even if you didn't commit crime, it will come and carry you.
I hope that does it for those of you who are really into the scary stories, especially this time of year. Personally, I'm a bit of a wimp, so I try to avoid the horror films, but soak it up while you can, because Halloween is this weekend. And Colette Kennedy will be here right after the break, and she'll let you know what the weather's going to be like in time for trick or treating. Stay with us. Welcome back. A powerful storm in the United States has left more than 20 million people under flood alerts. Forecasters are predicting parts of the eastern seaboard could experience some of the worst coastal flooding seen in 2 decades. Susanna De Silva has more from Washington.
The water is coming, and forecasters say there will be a lot of it. Places like Philadelphia, Alexandria are already seeing streets flooded. Sandbags are being distributed to residents and businesses, and they are trying to do what they can throughout the day before the high tide, which is expected in the afternoon. 20 million people are on alert, and these are in some areas that do see flooding, but it is the severity of that flooding that is expected that the forecasters are warning about. The National Weather Service saying it could be the worst since Hurricane Isabel back in 2003, with the potential for 2 to 4 feet of flooding. Also going to see more rain, high winds expected today. Now with, of course, so much conversation about climate change and COP26, some pointing out that rising sea levels can mean that extreme events like this can have even more devastating consequences. Now, this comes as other parts of the East Coast, like Massachusetts, are still cleaning up from the first nor'easter of the season that was declared a cyclone bomb. It brought 2 to 8 inches or 50 to 100 millimeters of rain, as much as some places normally see in a month. At one point on Wednesday, there were 500,000 people in Massachusetts without power. There are still tens of thousands without. 3/4 of some communities don't have any power yet, and some residents are being told not to expect power back until tomorrow. There is another storm expected today. It is not supposed to be as bad as the one earlier this week, but will, at the very least, complicate those cleanup efforts. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Washington.
Colette Kennedy is here now for a look at our weather forecast. Colette, I see you've got a Halloween theme behind you. My eyes were drawn to the screen.
Yes.
Take it away.
It is that time, right? I know a lot of kids kind of dressing up today for school, but Sunday's the big day. Do we want the forecast? Enter at your own risk. I think we'll risk it here. And by the way, the timing, sunset on Sunday will be 6:26 in Windsor. So in terms of getting ready and getting out there, because I know it's always, I want to go. Can we go yet? This is your forecast for around 7 p.m. Now, the winds may be a little stronger than this. So we could see some gusts towards 40 kilometers an hour. So that's one thing to take note of. And the slightest chance for an isolated shower. At this point, that is all I'm seeing. So otherwise, partly cloudy skies. So not too scary there for our trick-or-treaters. Some of the daytime highs, in some cases, they were certainly set earlier in the day. And then as the rain kind of intensified, temperatures were leveling off or dropping off a little bit. We're at 12 degrees now. The sustained winds still east-northeast, but some stronger gusts, especially along the north shore of Lake Erie there. So we're getting into, at times, some of those winds gusting over 50 kilometers an hour. And then you add to that, of course, that just pushes more of this rain inland. So we are seeing some heavier bands coming through. We will have some heavier bands for the early part of the evening and early part of the overnight even. And then it will begin to lighten up and we get into more of these off and on kind of showers. So we will be getting to some improvement in terms of what's happening Sunday. Some clearing out in the morning. And did you see that? Like just the slightest chance of a shower passing on through. Additional amounts in general, we're looking at another 10 to 15 millimeters of rain. Locally, though, obviously along the lakeshore there's going to be some areas getting some heavier amounts. Temperatures tonight, as those winds remain gusty, 8 to 9 degrees for the lows. And then tomorrow, 12 degrees. In terms of the daytime high, there will be dry spells, so it's not going to be raining continuously through the day. There's a really nice afternoon on Halloween, and the temperature just starts to come down a bit. And by Monday morning, look at that low, bottoming out. Well, do I say bottoming out? Are you seeing what's happening later on in the week? Yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday. We're talking about those overnight lows, so corresponding, maybe not through Windsor, but there'll be some areas closer to the lake, Lake Huron I'm talking about, where we may see some lake effect or some flurries coming down as we get towards midweek, end of the week.
But nothing to complain about for Halloween. That's great news for everybody.
Yeah,
and I'm most excited to just indulge in all that chocolate, rain or shine, so that's good.
Exactly. You really don't need good weather for that.
Exactly. Thanks, Colette. Have a great weekend.
You too.
When we come back, an Ontario photojournalist is being honored at an international conference. That story and a look at her work right after the break. Canadian fashion mogul Peter Nygard made a brief video appearance in a Toronto court today, where he was formally charged with 6 counts of sexual assault and 3 counts of forcible confinement. The incidents date back to the late 1980s and mid-2000s. Earlier this month, Nygard dropped his fight against extradition to the U.S., where he faces 1 charge of sex trafficking. He is denying all the charges. And federal health officials have updated their recommendations on COVID-19 booster shots. The latest review by the National Advisory Committee on Immunization shows vaccines continue to be effective, but the data also indicates their effectiveness may decrease over time, so booster shots could be required.
Emerging evidence suggests vaccine effectiveness against infection may decrease over time in some situations. At this time, NACI is recommending a booster dose for some populations at highest risk of severe illness and waning protection following the primary series.
The committee's recommendations say those with the highest risk of severe COVID-19 should get a booster of an mRNA vaccine, such as Moderna or Pfizer. Those people include adults living in long-term care or other congregate settings, and adults 80 years of age and older. The booster should be administered at least 6 months after the first vaccinations were received. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved the emergency use of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for children aged 5 to 11. It paves the way for a smaller dosage of Pfizer-BioNTech shots, 1/3 the amount given to teens and adults. The decision means 28 million American children could be eligible to get the vaccine. One more regulatory hurdle remains: a final approval from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, although that's expected to happen next week. In a tweet this afternoon, Health Canada says it's aware of the FDA's authorization and that its review is still ongoing and is being prioritized. A Toronto photojournalist will have 2 of her images displayed at COP26. The 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference is being held in Glasgow and kicks off this weekend. Talia Ricci spoke with the photographer about her inspiration and the impact she hopes her images will have.
Joanne MacArthur knows the images she captures through her lens can be tough to look old.
Yeah, I spent 2 weeks driving thousands of kilometers in Australia while the fires were happening. So I slowly crouched down and got the image, and the kangaroo looked at me. And I think it's interesting that, we see this animal in the charred remains of her home, but it's not even a natural home. It's a eucalyptus plantation, which really shows, the human footprint right now. And another of my images is of a cow in transport at the Turkish-Bulgarian border. And these are animals that are transported all through Europe down into Turkey for slaughter. And this image is important because of the emissions caused by not only eating animals, but transporting them globally.
MacArthur's images are part of the Earth Project's Environmental and Biodiversity Photography Competition. Those 2 photos, among others, will be showcased at one of the world's largest international meetings, COP26. The competition's goal is to promote the event and the importance of taking care of the planet.
Viewing these photos can actually stimulate some passion, some engagement, and I think that is why we're running, and why the Earth Project and Nature Picture Library is running this competition. Voting on which photo is your favorite, that is a small step that then can cascade into more actions.
After the summit, the plan is to take the exhibit on the road to local communities around the world, including Toronto. MacArthur hopes these snapshots remind people why the world is worth protecting.
These images are proof of the destruction that we're creating, and they bring us face to face with the problems and also the solutions, and also the beauty of nature and all of those animals and this planet, the environment. It's worth saving. And that's one of the joys of photography, is that we get to show that.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Some powerful images there. That is it for CBC Windsor News. Thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful weekend and a very happy Halloween.